thinking, now that you said, remember when you used to do those mixtapes for a girl?
Yes.
Yes.
That's the only time I've ever done one. I remember the mixtape I made for this girl who was in my psychology class.
Okay.
And, you know.
And what were you trying to do when you made that tape?
Well,
Not the ultimate goal. I don't mean that.
Impress the girl, probably.
Yes,
right?
but what were you doing?
Well, that one of those, that would be both, that may be both seeking and lust subsystems, right? So there are a couple of things, but there is an element of, and the way you described it was, for me, my mixtape in some way was an active display, just like male birds
Yes.
have the feathers.
Right.
Exactly.
It was an example.
This is me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My emotional. I remember I put a New Order, "Everything's Gone Green," which is an obscure. It's right after their lead singer killed themselves, and they became New Order. There's this remarkably depressing song. Which, by the way, if you've ever listened to Joy Division, the lead singer killed himself, and I remember they were interviewing one of the guitarists, like, we just didn't see that coming. I thought, you've been playing in the band, listening to this guy for years.
Yeah.
And you missed it all. You never heard it.
Were you listening to what this guy was saying?
No, they didn't listen to the lyrics either. But that's it, and that's what I was going for. When you were creating that tape, you were putting you out there. This is how I'm feeling. This is what
Yeah, it's sort of almost a resume in that
Yes.
moment for the other person to get to know who you are. Right?
and I didn't.
I think too that there's emotion that are connected with music, and it's sort of a feeling that you have connected to, well, not only the music itself, but the event that you're at or the situation.
You see them in concert as opposed to at home.
Right.
With
Right.
headphones on at 2 a.m. As a teenager, that was sort of those headphone moments. You would sort of. I remember hearing. There's a band called the Jesus and Mary Chain, and their music sounds.
Jeff, did you just say yes? You have that collection?
No, I don't have that collection,
all right,
but I
that
remember
was-
them. I remember them. Yes.
All right.
And it sounds a little like if you cross the Beach Boys with a chainsaw.
Oh, okay.
So-
that happens.
So there's these sort of like there are these sort of Beach Boy-esque, Beatle-esque melodies buried under just layers of feedback. It's like
Right.
It's like it's and so there's a song they have called "You'll Never Understand Me." And I remember as a teenager listening to that. You're right. No
Sounds
one's
true.
ever gonna
Sounds
understand
Nobody
me.
That's
will.
right.
And it
And
was
that was the point, man.
It was like, and I saw them. I've seen them in concert a couple of times, and first time I saw them at in Knoxville, Tennessee, in 1990.
Okay.
And I guess I was.
There's a memory right there for you. All
I
right.
guess I was 19 when I
Okay.
saw them, maybe 20, and so they come into the Knoxville Theater, and the opening band was Nine Inch Nails. And so it was already a little raucous because the lead singer, Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, grabbed the guitarist by the hair and started dragging him around the stage. And I was like, we are not in Kansas anymore.
We're out there now.
But when the Jesus and Mary Chain came on, first off, before they came on, the whole venue filled with smoke. I'm like, what is this? And suddenly I noticed that they were turning all the lights like toward us. And so when they came on, well, first off, before they came on,
You were
they
blinded. You couldn't see,
well,
right? All right.
that was about to happen. They played a video of a song that I'd never heard from them, and they played. I was like, why are they playing a video before they come on? And then the song goes off, smoke rolls in, and suddenly the lights start going in your eyes, so you can't see. You're being disoriented, and the band is just a wall of feedback. You can't tell when the next song begins or ends, and they don't speak. The lead singer sort of just draped over the and he's and it's just whatever, and they only played for like 30 minutes.
Right.
And at one point I sort of just turn and see what everybody's doing, and everybody's got their mouths open. They're going, my God, what is this? And some people are scared.
Happening.
And then suddenly it stops, and somehow the smoke is gone, and they disappeared, and we all just sort of filed numbly out of the theater.
That was it.
What was
Concert
that?
over.
And then I remember, my girlfriend at the time, and she was like, "Oh, that was horrible. What was that?" And I thought to myself, that is the greatest thing I've ever seen. That was literally, it was like, wow, that was
Yeah.
perfect. perfect.
That's yes. Okay.
And you knew she wasn't for you.
And she wasn't.
Yeah, that didn't
were-
last long, did
Because
it?
my wife actually has seen them twice with me, and she's a Mary Chain fan. So that is a there's a point there.
There
That's
you
a
go,
compatibility factor
Though I
there.
will
This
say
is not a
they
personality
seem to
thing.
have learned how to play instruments in the
Since
in
then.
time.
Yes, yes.
Or maybe because they're even though the feedback is still there is there
They moved the guitars away from the speakers.
there
so
was.
that,
And when I say
something happened.
feedback, I mean ear piercing, not
yeah.
like this shrill, like a dentist drill.
Thinking now that you said, remember when you used to do those mixtapes for a girl?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the only time I've ever done one. I remember the mixtape I made for this girl who was in my psychology class,
Okay.
and
And what were you trying to do when you made that tape?
well, I
Not the ultimate goal. I don't mean that.
Impress the girl, probably.
Yes,
right?
but what were you doing?
that one of those that would be both that may be both seeking and lust subsystems, right? So there are a couple of things, but there is an element of, and the way you described it was for me, my mixtape in some way was an active display, just like
Yes.
male birds
Yes.
have the feathers.
Right.
Exactly.
It was an example.
This is me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My emotional. I remember I put a New Order. Everything's Gone Green, which is an obscure. It's right after their lead singer killed themselves, and they became New Order. There's this remarkably depressing song. Which, by the way, if you've ever listened to Joy Division, the lead singer killed himself, and I remember they were interviewing one of the guitarists, like, we just didn't see that coming. I thought, you've been playing in the band, listening to this guy for years.
Yeah.
And you missed it all. You never heard it.
Were you listening to what this guy was saying?
No, they didn't listen to the lyrics either. But that's it, and that's what I was going for. When you were creating that tape, you were putting you out there. This is how I'm feeling. This is what
Yeah,
And-
it's sort of almost a resume in that
Yes.
moment for the other person to get to know who you are. Right?
And I didn't ever use the term display, but that's exactly what it was.
Right.
And isn't your list now on Pandora kind of the same way? This is me. This is who I am. This is what I'm feeling.
It should have been private until he pulled it up on the screen. there,
Mike's
so.
list.
Now
You're
I'm getting
listening to that.
psychoanalyzed.
There's a lot of Tiny Tim on this. I don't know. I'm not.
Tiptoes through the
that is
tulips
not
with me.
true.
Yes.
I'm not sure what that means.
One-hit wonders are on there. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a.
So that's the first one that popped up, but there's so many more out there that connects with a place and time.
Listen
in
to the
your
lyrics of that
history.
song. That's a really dirty song. You ever listen to it?
Yes.
No,
Yes.
I don't. No,
It is
that
really-
is what you quoted earlier. We don't listen to the lyrics, right?
We don't have.
That's
So
all
the
I
music is
listen to
good.
often is the
What?
lyrics. From when I was young, I learned lyrics to songs, and all of a sudden the words would pop in my head, and that's all I, and
They'll come out like in conversation or
Well,
or.
too often. Yeah.
But and that's another one of the subsystems that and there is there and we talk about this in therapy. Like if I'm talking with someone and a lyric comes into my mind, it often helps me to understand what's going on in this moment
yeah.
that I otherwise couldn't know.
Okay.
Like I remember I was I've used this example 1,000 times, but I was grading papers or tests, whatever, out in front of this was before Davidson Schuster building was built, and I'm doing, and suddenly there are people around me, and the Elvis Costello lyric. There's a song called "This Is Hell," "This is hell, this is hell, hell is heaven in reverse." And why is that song in my head? And then I realized, wait a minute, these people are really annoying me. I really am. All this time I've been exerting all this energy, and people are like, this is hell. You know,
That's where I'm at. All right. So,
I need to do something about that. One of the lyrics in that is, "My favorite things plays again and again, but it's by Julie Andrews and not by John Coltrane."
There you go.
yeah. You may not be able to control some of those lyrics
You
that pop in
can't.
your
You
head.
can't.
That kind of things. Well, man, this has been cool today to talk about music and hear your own experiences, and we get to share some things about it. What's the final word on music? Is there anything we can do from a mental health side? Is it comforting? Can I go listen to that song when I'm down, or how do I do?
You should engage as many activities as you can that'll help introduce you to yourself. That'll help
Okay.
you to integrate parts of yourself that can generate that complexity we talk about. You don't have to think about it intellectually. We've talked about music in a way that could preclude the possibility of some folks just enjoying it. It's enough to just do that.
Right,
But,
right.
you know.
Without a big purpose. You started out by asking the question, what is the purpose of music? So do you have an answer now that we've talked about
I
it?
like the idea that there's this notion by Schopenhauer, and he said that all great art must be useless. And there's also a lyric by Elvis Costello, "What shall we do? What shall we do with all this useless beauty?" Well, it needs to be useless because utility is only such a small fraction of what's asked of us in the world. If our job is to dig ditches, then it's certainly important that we dig the ditches we need to. But the rest of life is something else other than that. And I think art, beauty, all of it should be wonderfully useless. So it has utility. That's certainly important.
Okay.
But its utility is in its uselessness, I think. So.
Okay. All right. Rather profound in a way. Yeah, play with and use all the crayons in the crayon box.
There you go.
I think we've talked about. Jeff, good to have you here today,
Well, thank
man.
you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for being
It was-
here. All right. With that, I guess we'll stop there. We'll see you next time.
You have a story to tell. Columbus Podcasting can tell your story with a world-class video podcast of professional quality. Viewers and listeners can access podcasts anywhere, anytime. ColumbusPodcasting.com. Give us a call today.
You did a great job the other day on ad-libbing on the street videos. Dr. Long,
appreciate that.
Dr. Long shot me an email, and the title of the email was Street Videos. And he was, yeah. So I thought, we're in trouble now.
Oh, no,
But,
street videos.
But street video.
Can I plug that in there? As long as I can have street tacos in there somewhere.
You got a
I'm good.
plug there? Try it. If it is, you got a plug.
This
try it.
man. See, this is what I've learned. I've learned that I can't take him anywhere.
All right, there you go.
I've learned that for
Yeah,
sure.
he's trying to. He's already sent like 12 Instagrams and 42 tweets out. You know, what's up?
Unfortunately,
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Because you don't want to hear what I got to say.
unfortunately, Dr. B, you know, we put out tons of good, great quality work.
All right.
And the thing is, they see it.
Okay.
They might not click on it, but they see it. So, you know, make sure I'm putting it in, you know, an available space for them to see it. So that's
In their own time, you know, because we understand people come to their, you know, their own lights and understands in their own time and space. So, you know, it'll be out there. You can take your time, go do what you gotta do.
Well, I'm just glad to have you guys in the studio. That's all.
But Santi is the man, Dr. B. I just want to let y'all know Santi
All right.
is the man.
Santi, you were talking those street videos, and Dr. Long sent me he liked them, by the way. He really thought it was kind of cool ad lib about it. You guys were just
I was reading off
you
the
were
teleprompter.
freestyling. No, you were not. You were out there, man. And
The words were just, you know.
I mean, the word came in. Somebody said the word alien, and then it was like, hey, you. Alien hunters, you need to have a podcast. I like it.
gotta grab the attention.
That was very cool, very smooth, and I think that's an example too of just being yourself and being in the moment, and you know, responding with that authenticity we were talking about a moment ago, and having fun at the same time. Now, you can't have fun all the time because that doesn't necessarily make money. And move the part A down to part B.
But go back to your last point real quick as far as one thing we've learned, and to what you just pointed on, being yourself. That's one of the main things that we've learned throughout working with everyone we work with, is we had to stay true to who we were regardless of what happened.
Makes sense.
We were put in a lot of different scenarios and, you know, situations and places where you're often, you know, given a choice. Do you be you, or do you know, switch it up? And we've, since day one, we've stayed true to ourselves. You know, comes with the good and the bad, but overall, we like
Comes with the bad.
Let's say sometimes it comes with the bad.
Not everybody's going to be a fan, right? I mean, you better.
There
That's
are a lot of non-fans.
Right. What you said.
All right, that's what he said. All right, so but I'm thinking you're right about that. But that, you know, that's part of life, and sort of moving through those moments. That it's not all about your hurt feelings, or it's not all about some thought you have in your head all the time. You got to kind of move on and get over that, and not be so self-critical, or not have your ego so fragile.
Egos,
you know,
egos are out there. If you want to be, I don't want to say, oh, you got to, in order to be successful, you got to remove your ego, because there's a lot of successful egotistic
right?
people.
Oh yeah.
But
These days and times,
like he said, with these relationships nowadays, with the way the society is if you can just maneuver better, is that me?
I think that is.
If you can just maneuver better with people, aka, like you said, sometimes don't always think about yourself. Don't put you in front of everything. Things will work better, because if everyone is thinking about everyone else, then everyone is taken care of. It's that simple. Because if you're just only thinking about yourself and you can't care for another person, like no one else can be cared of than just you.
You know, it's much more important what happens the day after the revolution than the day of. And in some ways that is reflective of what happens in therapy too. When someone comes in and we initiate some sort of change process, there's some sort of movement, some sort of understanding, some sort of skill imparted. It's really the most important thing is what happens next. And I think that's sort of the subtext in all this, and even the paper I want to write. I want to think about what happens next, and how do we ensure that what happens next can be somehow a fidelity or somehow connected in the best possible way to what happened the day before.
All right. I like it. It's food for thought. And I don't think we always think that long term necessarily. And maybe we need to. All right, good conversation, Dan. I guess that's it. That's
Boom.
a wrap. We'll see you next time.
this Uma
Thurman.
Uma Thurman. She's
Yes.
doing that. She's the little girl with the climate change. Uma Thurman.
No, that's
No.
So the transits that are still interesting to us here in 2019 are the ones that are taking place in other solar systems.
okay.
Now, wait a minute. That
Yes.
implies something, right?
Yes, it does.
That implies that there are actually planets around other stars. And in fact, the very way we discovered planets around other stars had to do with the way that the planets were orbiting around those parent stars.
Right.
And so there's a whole new class of planets that we know a lot about now
Yes.
that are called extrasolar planets.
Extrasolar planet.
Extrasolar. Extrasolar means they're not orbiting our sun, they're orbiting another star.
All right.
We now know of over 4,000 extrasolar planets.
Wait a minute. 4,000.
Over 4,000. And by
Over
the way, that
4,000.
number keeps going up, so it's a little bit hard for me to keep track. I think the latest number I saw was 4,084 known confirmed exoplanets or extrasolar planets.
Incredible.
And so by the way, let me throw that shortening in.
Yes.
You'll see the word exoplanet.
Right.
And exoplanet is just because guys like myself got tired of saying extrasolar planet. It was just too many syllables.
yeah.
So we just cut it down to exoplanet.
Shorten it up. Make it quick. And we're
you go.
moving on. Okay, I got it.
In with a cool crowd. So if you're in with a cool crowd, you'll call them exoplanets. So when you hear the term exoplanet, just think about a planet around a star that's not the sun. It's around another one of those stars that we see up in the sky.
First of all, that's just amazing that we have that technology
Right.
and yeah, it's sort of brilliant scientific thinking to figure this out. I think,
and that's
in so
what
many
I'd like
ways.
to address a little bit. How did we find these things, right?
Yeah.
There's two ways that we found exoplanets, and actually the first way is a little bit more complicated. It's a pretty specialized circumstance.
Okay.
That's when a very big, massive planet is orbiting a fairly small star at a fairly close range.
Right.
When that's happening, scientists can actually detect the star moving in and out relative to the Earth. But really what it's doing, it's kind of going around in a circle. Now, we don't see that other planet, but we can see the star moving in a circle. Well, that implies that there has to be another planet out there tugging it and making it move. The
Okay.
planet does not give off light, so it's not bright
Oh,
enough
that's
for us
right.
to see.
Yes, I remember you saying, "Hey, it's all about light."
Right.
That's how we
Astronomy's
get to see
prejudiced
things,
to things that glow in the dark. So that's why we have to watch those things that glow in the dark, right? So the star itself, though, is glowing nicely, and we can see that star moving around in its own little circle because of a common orbit with a very heavy planet. But to us, what we're measuring is the radial movement in and out. And we do that with this thing called Doppler shifts or red shift, blue shift. And so that's the wavelengths of light being shifted relative to because of the motion of that star.
Got it.
So one of the ways we can figure out that there are planets around other stars is we can just see that star, we can see that parent star vibrating in and out a little bit, which really means it's going around in tiny circles.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there
Okay,
are only
that's
a
cool.
very special few star planet combinations that are just right for us to detect that kind of radial motion.
Well, and it's at such a distance too. And
Exactly.
it's still mind-boggling, and for me, anyway, that we can take those tiny little shifts and things, and then extrapolate that's an orbit.
That's right. That's right.
Pretty
Exactly.
cool idea.
But so astronomers came up with then a second way to potentially identify planets that were orbiting other stars. And this still is kind of a Goldilocks situation where everything has to be lined up just right.
Got it.
It's just that it's a more common occurrence, which is something called a transiting exoplanet. So we've talked about transits.
Okay.
Transits in our own solar system are a planet moving in front of the face of a sun. Well, a transiting exoplanet is another solar system out in our galaxy where the planet's planes of orbit are lined up just right to where the planet will pass in front of the face of its parent star.
Okay.
And when it does that, it dims the light from that parent star down a little bit.
Okay.
And then as it moves off the surface, off the face of its parent star, the light comes back up again. So it's just passing between us. It's not actually touching the star, but
Right.
it's passing in between us and that star. It drops the light coming to Earth down a little bit as it moves in front, and then as it moves out of the way, the light comes back up again. So,
Right.
so scientists developed a whole series of cameras that were very sensitive to picking up these slight variations in the light coming from stars due to planets passing in front of them. And they mounted some of those cameras on a couple of spacecraft. The first spacecraft to go into orbit around the Earth that had this technology on it was called Kepler.
Wow.
And so Kepler was a telescope named after Johannes Kepler, who studied planetary motions, by the way. So Kepler was a
You have a story to tell. Columbus Podcasting can tell your story with a world-class video podcast of professional quality. Viewers and listeners can access podcasts anywhere, anytime. ColumbusPodcasting.com. Give us a call today.
All right, Dan, good to see you.
Saturday
What is going on? Yes, Saturday
I am
morning.
not bathed.
of course, I hear.
Not
So-
bathed. This is the hat. As I
Yes.
mentioned earlier, I smell like deviled ham. Whenever I don't bathe for a while, I smell like a potted meat.
Oh my goodness.
So,
okay, potted meat.
I
Yes,
have not
there's a
eaten.
topic
I haven't
for
bathed
us
in a
right
couple
there.
of 4th of July and all that sort of stuff. And
Yeah, we just had the 4th of July. Did you see the fireworks? Or there?
I was in Atlanta. I
Celebration?
was on top of this building and I saw fireworks from they were all, many of them were far away, but I could see them from a surround. Centennial Park, Decatur, Buckhead, all these sorts of places. Boom, they were all going on around you. It's amazing.
Oh, that's pretty
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I like that idea.
For a brief moment, I felt okay to be alive. Just for
Okay,
a small,
just for a small,
just a small
brief
moment. I was,
You know, I think we need to work on expanding that
We
for
could.
you, particularly,
We could,
so
yeah.
you can enjoy this ride.
you know what else I have found that helps me to enjoy life is this wonderful new refreshing beverage, Supercharged.
Supercharged.
There you
Okay. Okay. I'll just leave it right there. Thank you. I appreciate that mention there. I'm sure the guys upstairs appreciate that as well. So, so what's been on your mind? So you could break into a commercial and it would go south in a hurry.
Okay,
We all
okay.
know that. Everyone watching this absolutely knows that. So.
I could do commercials. Let's see. What I was thinking with a couple of you brought something up, but I also had
Yeah.
something on the drive up to. It's a family tradition that we listen to David Sedaris audiobooks.
Okay.
That's what we For a while there was we were listening to Ayn Rand audiobooks,
Oh no,
But,
that was not happening.
but yeah,
that,
yeah.
that didn't happen.
but suddenly I found at one point my son, he was 10 at the time. I found him attempting to club a poor person to death.
okay.
And that's when I realized we needed to
We might need to pay attention a little bit more.
we needed to stop the Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
So, but so we've
Okay,
been
people can put those two together later. All right, there we go.
we've been listening to like some David Sedaris, and which is interesting because sometimes some of what he talks about is not kid friendly. So you have to
Right.
hover near the pause button
Okay.
to be able to move through some things because he has this one story about Fire Island that not for kids.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
But it's funny, it's just not for kids.
Yeah. Right.
So we're up there. We're
part of
heading
your
toward.
job, right? As a parent,
It's parent, yeah. But I thought part of my job actually is to guide him through tactical shaming.
Yeah, we talked about your parental shaming earlier.
That's right. I'm going to write a book on
yeah,
shame-based
we're
parenting.
gonna- This is. There's a need for an intervention on that for sure.
There is. There probably is.
Okay.
So we're in the car. We're going up, and suddenly Sedaris tells a story that's there. His stories are autobiographical, and I'm sure there's a little liberty taken in this one. But it talks about when he was younger, somewhere in the age between 6. Well, actually, he makes it sound like it started somewhere around that time, when he had these severe obsessive compulsive symptoms. Like he would be in the
Right.
classroom, he would get up 28 times during classroom and he would go and have to lick the light switch. On the way home, he would have to lick mailboxes, statues in people's yards. He would have to lick the doorknob to his house. He would have to kiss the stairs, all these sort of things. And he would. So a 10-minute walk would be an hour and a half, and it was just sort of riddled and weighed with all these rituals that you have to go through. Boom, boom,
It
boom,
seems
boom.
very interesting too, because with the tongue, he has to lick things. That's germs and everything.
It's-
and,
that's- but
you know,
he's-
that's got to drive somebody crazy in
Good.
his household. I'm sure. Don't they?
Well, the teacher was rather
Yeah.
upset. It began with the teacher sort of wanting of sending a letter home to his mom to address these things.
Okay.
And the teacher, at least from his perspective, wasn't quite understanding what this all could mean. She
Right.
thought it was just simply sort of
Right.
she didn't.
Very bizarre in some ways, and that's why you're not going to come to a quick understanding of that until you look at it a little
Well,
bit.
yes,
We
and
know
you-
that, right?
And you might want to, you know, most of the classroom you'd want to touch things with a glove. You know, when that kid's around.
Right. Everyone
But-
wears gloves now.
but the so and he tells the story. Oddly enough, he makes it relatively humorous. But if you've ever been subject to obsessive compulsive symptoms or known someone who has, they are terrifying, and they're hell. They just really are. They're tough, and to be plagued
It's
by
kind of
them.
associated. I mean, it's anxiety,
Mhm.
right? It falls into that camp.
Mhm.
You look at anxiety, depression, illness, those
Well,
kind of things, for sure.
And that's where it becomes sort of interesting, because if you look at it from a purely biological stance, we can say that maybe it is something awry with the nervous system. We could say that, and certainly in very extreme cases, that there seems to be some genetic pull, there's history of severe obsessive disorder in families often. But one way to think about it would be, because I tend to, I don't know if you know this, but I can look at things psychoanalytically.
Sure.
Sometimes, every once in a while. I
Yeah,
can do
once
that.
in a while, like
Oh, yeah.
every day.
Yeah, it's-
We got it.
So we can think about it. If at the core it is anxiety, obsessive compulsive symptoms are an attempt at a solution. It is what Freud called making the best of a bad job. Everything that was all of these obsessive acts, these obsessive thoughts and compulsive acts, are all circle around a central and core anxiety, and that they are attempts to mediate that. They're attempts to be able to do something with it. And if you, for instance, he makes just a passing mention of what was going on at a time when these things really became difficult. His parents had just moved from the north to North Carolina, and they were living in this temporary house. And so you can see that at that moment he was placed under a tremendous amount of pressure and stress.
Okay.
And as a kid, whatever tendency he had toward compulsive activity and obsessive thought suddenly became increasingly exacerbated as a result of this change. And so the solution became even more drastic and dire. And as you can see, that developmentally there are all these sorts of, particularly as we move into middle school, social pressures, puberty. They're both internal and external stressors that occur as a result of their developmental arc, and they tend to increase. And so
Yeah, and that I was interested in his age at the time. You didn't mention that, but I'm assuming it was middle school.
I think so. I think we said he was. I think he was 10 or 11. I may be wrong. But it seemed to be somewhere
Okay.
around there,
Okay.
4th, 5th, 6th grade, something like that.
It was just developmental. In
Yeah,
terms of
he was right there in that sort of spot.
Okay.
And so you can see that it's an attempt to be able to cope, and it's what makes it sort of like most symptoms. And this is the way to sort of think about this. This is the way, particularly psychoanalytically, we would define a symptom. It provides an immediate and limited but very effective solution to the anxiety at hand. But long term, it tends to feed itself. So it's a symptom that begins to actually reinforce itself and make itself worse. Because if his anxiety on some level was feeling alone and vulnerable, moving away from friends and family and a network of connections that somehow made him feel supported, as soon as he comes to a new place, licking doorknobs and light switches is not going to make you connected to people.
No, as a matter of fact, it's going to run people in the opposite
Right.
direction, or he's going to suffer some real consequences from other people.
And the vicious spiral of that is boom, it begins to get worse and worse and worse. And so the problem you fix now requires more of the same fix, and then at some point it can even unmoor itself and no longer be tied at all to the thing that initially started.
Okay. That's
So
interesting.
in his case, it seemed to, if his story is accurate, it was remarkably debilitating. And for him, it wasn't until he had maybe a bit more control over it. It wasn't until he started smoking as a young adult and doing drugs that he was able to do something with those things. And he would talk about how the ritual of smoking, lighting a cigarette, of stepping away to smoke, all these sorts of things were a way for him to suddenly, once he picked up chain smoking, to develop a set of compulsions and rituals that were more socially acceptable. And so he made that trend. Now, why his parents didn't take him to a therapist, I don't know. That in of itself this was in the 70s, I guess.
Excuse me.
Late 60s, early 70s, I guess. That's when Uvalde was.
Right. It might be
But-
some kind of taboo against that, particularly.
But that also could be
within the-
diagnostic, that the family, it's simply just,
Yes.
so I don't know. And if you've listened to any of his stories, he's lots going on.
Yeah, it seems like there is a lot going on with him, but he's prolific and he's on NPR and he's on all of these. I guess there's shows in some regard. So
Yeah,
he seems to be doing pretty well and pulled his act together, at least literally.
he doesn't have his
really
own drink
rare,
yet,
too.
but he's not quite hasn't reached that level of success, but he's moving in that direction.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. So it took a sort of a life of its own, moved away from the initial starting point for him with the anxiety and the move and the other kinds of things there. So.
And part of what makes this interesting is that if you think about this psychodynamically, all of us come up with a solution for the things that we feel and the stressors we have. It's just some of us are lucky enough, either through genetic pull or having the right sort of developmental environment, we come up with much better solutions than the ones he came up with. Well, all of us have a way of, we have at least some modicum of maybe obsessive or compulsive things that move through us. But for instance, there's a hierarchy of ego defenses that are talked about in the psychodynamic literature. And one of the ones he exhibits is a good one to have, a sense of humor. So if you are experiencing that initial anxiety that anybody would feel in a social setting, but you're able to tell a joke, that's a sort of defense that mediates and your affect, but in such a way that brings people closer. So it's certainly true that humor can go off the rails and can end up running people away. I think my wife probably could talk about that.
I was going to say, we probably have plenty of examples just from this show,
That's
not only
right.
at your home, but
the fact that certain things she says you should not find funny, and I can't help it. It's just,
that's an immediate signal for you to find something.
Nice, and that's,
Yeah, that's right.
But by and large, it's a much better defense than the compulsive licking of a light switch.
Sure.
But all of us have a pattern of symptoms, adaptive or otherwise, that we make use of. And they become something that's often referred to as character structure. They become, it's reflex, it's like an autopilot, it's like an implicit map of our insides and our outsides that we sort of follow. And built into that are these solutions we come up with, these ways, and they are embedded. They're not something we're often aware of. They mediate automatically and reflexively. And part of what happens in therapy, if our man Dave Sedaris were to, as a kid, show up, part of the goal would be is to help him to name and to acknowledge at least some of the anxiety he's experiencing. If you created a space, if he were a younger child and you did play therapy, for instance, you could find a way for him to be able to put into words in some form of mediated action the sort of stressors that the move made. Since he's a little older at the time, you might get him to be able to tell you directly, or in the stories he speaks of. If you ask him what he's been doing and he starts telling you about a TV show he likes, sometimes those are small windows into talking about characters that he identifies with. And it becomes some small movement for him to begin to put into words instead of these reflexive actions, the things he's attempting to mediate. And you create what's known as an environment of dyadic regulation, as opposed to the solitary. There's dyadic regulation and there's solitary regulation. That's not what it is. But there's a fancy term for it. But
Okay.
when he is in these obsessive compulsive symptoms, he is stuck outside of the potential for dyadic regulation. The story begins with the teacher sort of making fun of him and sending a letter home. The story begins with a failure of potential dyadic regulation. If she had sat down with him, and it may not have been helpful for her to say, why do you keep doing this thing?
Right.
But she could have sat down with him and said, hey man, I know you're new here. When did you guys move down? She could have started there.
Okay.
That would be the moment of potential dyadic regulation. If that were successful in a successful treatment, part of what happens, including maybe helping him to sort of name some skills he could utilize, giving him some tools to navigate these things, but he also would be able to internalize. He would bring the teacher with him. And in the act of dyadic regulation, you sort of internalize that sort of stuff, and it becomes a new map, a new reflex, more adaptable. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It does make sense because the idea that we all are on this continuum a little bit with this OCD, the obsessive compulsive kind of thing, and that we build some kind of structure as we go along. But for him, it was an extreme. I mean, licking all these objects around in this world must have just horrified all the people close to him.
And
look for a significant reason for this in some way.
And you can see that it leaves him increasingly isolated and away from the potential for the level of dyadic regulation that he needs. And probably his family is also under a great deal of stress. I think at the time his mom was pregnant with his brother, I think. So there are all these familial pressures. So, and I think he had at that time 2 older sisters. I think he has 3. Maybe he has 3 older sisters.
Wow.
Or maybe, I think that's right. And what other maybe a younger sister? I think he has a younger sister too, or maybe I'm wrong. But so there was nothing there, or there was minimal things there to help him to be able to cope outside of that reflexive symptom.
Yeah, I'm wondering too. I mean, it seems like it was unconscious. He wasn't going in and saying, "Oh, when I get to North Carolina, I'm going to start licking the light switch." This was something that just manifested itself. What's the explanation? I mean, why couldn't he realize? Wait a minute, and think through this in some way, kind of self-regulate. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because if you go with when I've worked with patients with OCD, oftentimes with them, there's something dangerous about thinking it. There's something dangerous about getting close to it. There's an example that I can't remember the name of the text, but with a woman who had her husband had taken a job, and she had just moved into a new city, southern city, middle of nowhere, small town, and she began to, and they moved, and she had just had her second child. She had a 2-year-old, and she had a baby. And when she was leaving the house, if she were leaving the house with a sitter or by herself, especially by herself with the kids or whatever, she would have to check the stove 500 times. She had to go back and forth. She would have to do the locks almost 100 times. She just would, and she'd always had some compulsive trends, but they really become incredibly exacerbated. Well, part of our way to think about this, what she may need to think to move past that, if we take a psychodynamic step, is to think about the anger she may have toward her husband. the anger she may have toward her kids. There may be an unconscious desire for the stove to actually burn the house down because she might want to be free of all the pain and struggle and stress that she's under.
Right.
So there's a knot. There is a conflict between different parts of herself that find themselves tied to this symptom. And to untie the knot, you may have to get connected to things that are very difficult to think. Maybe even things that are impossible to think. For Siddhartha as a little boy, he may not have the capacity to be able to name these things. He's never, if he had lived in his hometown up until he was 10 years old, he doesn't have the words to know what moving means. Someone may at some point may have attempted that. So I think that's part of it. So sometimes the feelings are too much, but sometimes there's a conflict too. There is, and this is very psychoanalytic and maybe controversial in a number of quarters, but at least with some obsessive symptoms, there's a danger to really peering under the symptom, because what you find there can be maybe very dangerous and difficult. No one wants to think that they want to burn their family down.
Right.
But
You're having those kind of very horrible, unthinkable kinds of thoughts, and being able to confront those, and that's hard enough for anyone to do.
a number of folks that I've worked with throughout the ages, I'm not that old. I'm old, but I'm not that old. But throughout my career as a male hand model, throughout my career as a therapist.
What is it that you do? We gotta figure that out one day.
Yeah, what do I do?
That's another show. We'll get to that.
But oftentimes, some of the symptoms, the patterns you see, will be around things like pedophilia. Oh, I think I'm a child molester. I think I'm a horrible person. And that they can, they'll can't drive past the park because there'll be kids there, and they'll suddenly, oh my God, what a horrible person. And sometimes the symptoms serve the purpose of, or at least part of their purpose, is to punish. That the things that I feel are too much, and to project condemnation and aggression outward are a way to tie that knot. They offer a quick and not so easy, very difficult solution. Part of the work is to get someone to be able to, if not directly peer under what conflict may be arriving at that, getting them better at being able to feel the things that they feel.
Right.
I can think of an individual who had some those fears of pedophilia, and he had graduated from
And well, here's how it happened, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going out to my truck out the front door here at 1214 First Avenue to pick up a book that Dr. Hackett and I are going to do a Talk with Mike and Tom podcast coming up pretty soon. And happened to run into two of my favorite people walking down the street. I think I scared them just a little bit. Did I not scare you?
You scared me.
Okay, I didn't mean
Absolutely.
to. I did. That door
well, you know
opened.
what happened? You didn't scare me.
I think I did.
I think you startled my very skittish significant other. And
Okay,
then
let's
he
get a
lunged up.
close up of him over there
Yes.
being skittish. All right, perfect.
Don't
That's
say
how
boo.
it looks.
Don't say boo.
think
And then he jumped. He lunged. Let me just use a better word. He lunged.
He lunged.
He did.
Yeah.
And then he startled me. And so then.
Well, it all happened when I opened the door. So
That's right.
Yes.
I want to apologize for my opening of the door.
I think
I'm
that's
just trying to
it.
get out of the
I think
building. What
that's
did I
it.
do wrong? I don't know. And absolutely, there is no crime that has been committed here. Okay, I want to make sure. Is that true? Now,
True statement.
you have a background. You tell us a little bit about your background because you may know more about true crime than any of us. What do you think?
Maybe a little bit. I've never dabbled in criminal law.
Okay.
But I do have a background in law. I have a Juris Doctorate. So
Okay, so you're working as an attorney,
am.
so you've probably seen some things around. Now you do have interest, and so maybe one of your interests is true crimes. Is that true? I don't know.
Yeah, I do. You know, investigative reporting, true crime, and it's not something I've ever really talked about. I just happened to mention to my current that I like to listen to certain podcasts. But you know,
That's current right there.
Thank you for pointing. Yes, good. So
No,
can we just say this is my first time in your studio? We talked about people's second times. It's my first time here.
Well, listen.
I'm really enjoying this.
First of all, welcome. You are
you.
always
Thank you.
welcome here at the studio, and we have a lot of good folks coming in. Good people, good podcasts is what we say on our advertising. So, I was telling you guys a story about when Dr. Hackett and the film crew, we went out on the streets of Broadway, and we were asking people to be a part of our promotional video about podcast here. And you can find us at columbuspodcasting.com. So one of the things we asked, do you listen or watch, because it's both audio and video, podcast? And I was surprised. First of all, everyone was watching podcasts or listening to podcasts. Everyone we talked to. That sort of confirmed some things for me. But secondly, when we asked what they liked, a good percentage of the people said, you guessed it,
True crime.
true crime.
True crime.
All right, now what? All right, I'm fascinated. I've said before, I've read a few of those mystery novels. I've got audio books and I'm listening and so forth, but I'm not sure it's true crime. There's an entire category of true crime. So, Shatul, let me ask you, what is your definition of sort of the true crime genre?
So I think, and one of the things what I said to you is, before we get into that, I think we have to really look at, what I find interesting is, it depends who you ask, right?
Right.
So I think people pull different things out of these quote unquote true crime podcasts, just like we get into the books of true crime,
Right.
mystery, suspense. If you go into like the James Patterson type
Right,
stories,
right,
right?
right, yeah.
We have a character, we have antagonists, we have protagonists, we have the whodunits, right?
Right. There's a plot points that move through and you kind of mislead
you have the
folks a
arc.
little bit. Yeah, arc, and you're
Right.
trying to find, yes.
And then everybody's with you, you're on it, you know who did it. And then there's that dun dun dun, not who you thought.
Wow, yeah.
Right?
That kind of keeps us there, doesn't it? I
It
think
keeps
that's what
us
happens.
there, it keeps us right there with you. And so, but then there's that other genre of the cold case. Nobody could figure it out. Maybe you'll figure it out. Let us give you everything we have. You might be the one. There's
So
that
now
whole
wait,
era.
now wait a second. Now, if I like it. First, it's intriguing, but is it really an unsolved case, a cold case, and it's kind of left up to the listener to help figure it out.
Depends on what you're listening to. There are some out there that present everything that we have. We're going to, whoever the moderator or the narrator or whoever is the person. Personally, I don't like the cold case files ones. I need to get to the end. I need you to catch it.
Well, I had heard that. Now, somebody just let this slip, and I was listening. But they say, listen, one of the first things you need to do is go to the end of the book or the end of the story and find out who did it, and then work your way back and then start over. I'm not sure that's always true.
Well, not for me. As I said, I think it just depends on who you are. And this comes back to, I'm a lawyer, you're a psychologist, right? That's what we do for a living. That doesn't necessarily always align with our dispositions or our backstory, right?
Right.
So I think we all bring a lot to the table in all of our years of living. Our
so we might come up with something that no one else.
Or not just for the solving of the mystery, but why are we interested in this? A lot of times when I'm listening to things, what I really like to hear is, how did the lawyers treat these stories that are involved in this? How did they deal with some of the examination of the witnesses? How did they deal with the experts in the case? How did they deal with the law enforcement aspect of it? That's just an interest of mine.
Well, that fascinates me too. I like that a lot because I want to know how they really checked out the evidence. What's your alibi? Well, I was at so-and-so's place at this time. Well, if it's a good detective, they're not going to take the word for it. They're going to go there. They're going to get witnesses. They're going to get up more evidence to make sure that alibi sticks. So.
Well, and what now? Okay, you just hit the 30,000-foot view of that.
Okay.
Bring it down. If by profession you're now dealing with personalities, you're dealing with, let's say, traits, characteristics.
Or personalities, or even, as we're going to talk about on another podcast coming up with the good Dr. Hackett, the personality disorder, maybe even the psychopath.
Absolutely.
So there's some crazy characters out there.
Well, and let me tell you how that works for me. When I hear personalities or disorders, there's some nuance there as well. And when we're dealing with dispositions of people, we're dealing with the entire people, the population. So as a lawyer, in all of my cases, I have to work and collaborate with agencies, clients, opposing counsel, fact witnesses, expert witnesses. Many times I can't really get to what I need to get to until I figure out how to get to that person. So as I'm watching, as I'm listening, more than the true crime, more than the murder itself, what I'm really interested in is the victim, the victimology. There's some profiling type stuff that goes on. But what I'm really getting to is the stuff that would normally be redacted, the law enforcement sensitive stuff out of document productions, for example. In any case, I can really hear that from a different perspective. This is now a reporter who maybe through a FOIA request has gotten evidence or has gotten documents or has gotten things from the entire police file. And then if there's things that are redacted, the reporters who's now reporting this podcast knows what's protected through First Amendment privileges, has now gotten through the trouble.
You have a story to tell. Columbus Podcasting can tell your story with a world-class video podcast of professional quality. Viewers and listeners can access podcasts anywhere, anytime. ColumbusPodcasting.com. Give us a call today.
These things.
No, I think it's great, and to take the time out, I guess that is kind of an issue that Well, I wanted to say something about reading a good book or reading a
Yep.
book like this
Mm-hmm.
that has so much information on it, and we're reading less.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, that's kind of
That's another podcast, isn't it?
that's a whole nother thing. But I do think you're on the right track where you take a break, you do some inventory on what you want, where you're at, what you're going to do. Don't we all need to do that? And I'm not so sure everybody, the Joe walking up and down the streets doing that. I want to wave the flag out there and say, hey, stop and think, reflect, be introspective, think about the future, think about the past, figure out your next steps. And it's not about you, it's about how you can help other people. And as soon as we get everybody on that train, I think we're going to be better off.
In full disclosure,
thought,
though,
anyway.
when I was working full time and had a lot of responsibilities on my plate, it was a lot more difficult. As an old retired professor, I actually have the time to do this, so I'm not advocating it necessarily as, "Hey, I did it," and that kind of thing.
No, but I think it does make sense, and I'm all
Yeah.
about folks taking time out to really think about what they want and how they're going to get it, what's stopping them from getting it. Making good decisions that not only affect themselves but affecting others. So we try to do that in our counseling efforts, and I think it's something that we probably need to do as individuals.
You have a story to tell. Columbus Podcasting can tell your story with a world-class video podcast of professional quality. Viewers and listeners can access podcasts anywhere, anytime. ColumbusPodcasting.com. Give us a call today.
GJAC is ultimately, I think, pushes for a collective action. Part of why he still maintains the label communist is not because there are various communisms, but at the core of all of them, even the ones that went horribly awry, is the idea that somehow we need to be in this together. And that universal emancipation is the one point that all subjects should be aimed for. And so if these rules, they may focus on individual emancipation, but they may take us away from a universal emancipatory stance. And so he may have some conflict over that. Like, we have to be careful that we don't allow ourselves to be merely individuals, and that we are not thinking about the universal struggle for all of us to be able to experience a level of life that is really only afforded to people in the first world. So,
Right.
you know.
You have a story to tell. Columbus Podcasting can tell your story with a world-class video podcast of professional quality. Viewers and listeners can access podcasts anywhere, anytime. ColumbusPodcasting.com. Give us a call today.
Let's figure this out.
That's right.
All right, Dan Rose, how are you, sir? What's up?
It's it's Friday.
Well, it's going to be Friday for the rest of the day. I don't know
Hey, well,
how to break
it's-
the news
yeah.
to you on that.
It didn't come soon enough.
Yeah, long week, right? Okay.
Yeah, it's I got if this week were like a disease, I would say it was shingles.
Ooh,
That's
That's a rough one right there
Was,
for
yeah.
some reason. So let's hope that it gets better. It's a short time frame there. All right. So what else is up? How do you deal with a shingles week?
You Colt 45. I mean, like buckets of it. Just sort of, just.
Okay.
You know?
Well,
I'll tell you what.
That's what you got. That's what you
combine
got.
Colt 45 and pork skins, fried pork skins.
Fried pork skins.
I call that a Saturday night.
I hate to say this, but my son's on a keto diet, and for some reason there are pork skins at my house.
On the
I
keto
apologize to the universe, as a matter of fact, for that. But they can't do carbs, but they can do fat.
Pork skins.
They can do fat. It's crazy.
I
crazy
dated a
world.
girl for a while. It smelled like pork skins.
Oh,
I just felt that was
oh.
really couldn't go anywhere.
Do we need to know that? My
Just
question for that.
people have smells.
Well, yeah, I guess
Yeah.
they do. I hope this session today is not really
Oh, it's
about
nothing to do with smells. Nothing. It's just heat.
Okay. Well, I'm glad it's Friday too.
It
It's
is.
the end of a long week, and
It is.
hey,
It's been
here
tough.
it is Friday, and I think people really do feel better on the Friday going to the weekend. We're all working. We're trying to move toward.
I'm not working.
Yeah, our own time and so forth, and have free time during the weekend. So.
Every moment of my life is free time. I mean, somebody's paying for it, but it's free time for me.
Right. So they have no idea what they're getting for their money,
No.
but they're giving you money and you're enjoying it, right? So
That's
there's nothing
how
wrong.
it works.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I'm down for that. But yeah, so what's been on your mind lately?
Well, yeah,
What's
I
kind
thought
of
we-
these things happening?
We got to come up with something to talk with, and I thought about this. Now, in
Okay.
some ways, this is a little. My son would say this is a stale meme in a way. He might criticize, but you know,
Okay.
he's 47. What does he know? I
I think you said on the last show he was 12, I believe. But okay, we'll
maybe
do
he's
the
12.
math later.
He's
I think.
12 going on 47.
Okay,
But
good.
I thought about this because I've been reading this this book by Slovenian philosopher and psychoanalyst Slavoj Žižek.
Yes. Okay.
Somebody I read. I've occasionally dip into the guy's work, and reading that got me to think about some things.
Sure.
And also I was at home eating some vegan chili on a bed of brown rice with some Gardein beef tips, vegan beef tips.
Okay.
Get some sponsorship out of this because I ate a lot of
think,
Gardein.
I have no problem with all the sponsors you've mentioned so far.
Good,
we
yeah.
need to talk with those guys.
Except for my uncle Vinny, who in his meth lab, that was no one hit. That's
Yeah, Uncle Vinny is no longer with us. I understand after the explosion.
Yeah, it was an
so-
explosive venture. But I'm also and there was one of them YouTubes come up and talks about the black pill. You know?
Yes. Oh, yes. Now I
The black
remember.
pill. We can talk about it.
We had a little bit of text back and forth about that, just
About
a
the-
little
yeah.
bit. I was confused because I was thinking, well, we had the red pill, we had the blue pill,
Well,
and
you got-
now the black pill
There's also the
is
white
here.
pill. There's
Oh,
a
and the
black
white
pill,
pill.
a white pill. There may be other pills, but and the way to think how this might be relevant and maybe useful to some is that
I don't know
there
if there's
is
a rainbow pill, but go ahead. All
could
right,
be.
and
Yeah,
we're
that
gonna-
was last week. That was last week.
That's right.
If you know that scene in The Matrix
Yes.
where Bob Hope is. I mean, that's
No.
not,
That's
not
not. No, not.
Oh,
even
well, that didn't happen.
close.
Okay.
All right.
Nobody remembers who Bob Hope is. Do they
I'm the
remember?
only one in the room, and
Remember.
probably listening ever to this. But
Okay.
go ahead.
So there's this idea that in the film, I think it's Neo is the good guy, right?
Right.
So
I think
he's
that's the
being
name.
confronted by Orpheus, right? It's Orpheus?
Yes. Yes.
Orpheus. And he asks him, he says, look, now that you know things, you can take the blue pill and you can go back to sleep and this never happened. If you take the red pill, you're going to wake up and you're suddenly going to see how things really are. And you have two choices.
Yes.
So he chooses the red pill and he wakes up and then boom, he sees how things are. Well, a few years back, my son would say longer than a few years back, there was this notion of being red-pilled and how you could get woke. And that both the left and the right use this as sort of a way to talk about things, that to be red-pilled is to suddenly be aware of things. It was often talked in the alt-right community and even in some of the incel community about how you suddenly see how things really are, and different forms of woke. On the left, it could mean something different as well. But again, it's just this state of wokeness.
Yes, waking up to a new understanding, new vision of what's really going on behind the scenes, in other words.
Well, there's a wonderful scene in the Zizek film. I think it's in The Pervert's Guide to Ideology, but it may be in The Pervert's Guide to Film, where he replays that scene, and where he's in Neo's place, and he says, I want a third pill. I don't want either one of these.
Okay.
And
my sons always wanted the third choice. When I'd read in the parenting book to give them either you want to do this or you want to do that, and they always
that's why he's eating pork skins. It's really, you should have from whatever whatever you did back then.
There's a lot of things undoable that happened.
That's
back
right.
then,
So now
we'll see what happens.
He has a diet of pork skin. If he came up with a pork skin diet, I don't know how that would work.
It's somewhere in this keto diet, but don't ask me, and I'm not interested.
Keto.
Thank you.
Keto. Yes. But so that there are well, Zizek's point is that there is a way in which we may think that we've been woke, but that's actually an even greater trap. That to think that you suddenly see things clearly may be to be even further embedded and further trapped in things. So a wonderful example that he uses is that in California, they banned straws, and now lots of people are buying metal straws they take with them. They go to restaurants.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
That makes
and so
sense.
this could be an example of being red pilled. For instance, suddenly you realize the straws, and the reason why they banned the straws is because I think the straws were affecting Liza Minnelli somehow. I don't know.
Well, no. What I was thinking was there's so much plastic that suddenly in the ocean we have this nation of
there's a lot of plastic in
there.
Liza
Yeah,
Minnelli.
Absolutely. I was trying to move through that, but I didn't get very far. Go ahead.
Is she still alive?
Yes.
Okay, Katie. Okay. It's the plastic. So it lasts forever. but so too much plastic, it's like killing turtles and stuff, right?
So they went to paper in California, made it a law, and moved on. Yeah,
okay. There's nothing wrong with limiting plastic use, carbon footprint, but the problem potentially that is, as opposed to dealing with the root of the problem, of thinking about, wait a minute, what is, why do I live in a world where things are going into the ocean? What are the broader things going on here? You simply affect a small local change that may have no big consequence whatsoever. Right. Another example that Zizek gives is if you go to Starbucks and you buy a Frappuccino or a Crappuccino, whatever you buy there, and every time you buy one, you give $1 goes to support a third world country, family out of poverty. Okay. And Zizek, so again, nothing wrong with helping, but why would you question? There's a bigger question. Why do we live in a world where there's enough of everything, but there are people starving? So the question would be, you are lulled into thinking you're making a change or a difference, but you're actually just staying asleep enough in the matrix to perpetuate the very thing that has caused all these inequalities.
Okay.
And so there is a third pill, or maybe you decide to stay in the matrix and you attempt to be able to understand it from within, maybe even undermine it in a way, or maybe you channel it or direct it in a way that may create larger change. And so that's the old idea behind, and that was the potential third pill for Zizek. But there's this notion of the black pill. This is the notion that you wake up and that everything is crap, and it's a form of nihilism. Okay. It's the idea that when you really see how things are, you say, there's a philosopher, what's his name? I'll think of his name, but he was partly inspiration for the TV series True Detective, the first season. Okay. If you ever saw that.
Yeah.
But he's an antinatalist, and an antinatalist is someone who doesn't believe that human beings should reproduce. We should just die out. And he has a nihilist philosophy in which he sort of sees the human race as like a bacteria. We've infected the planet, and at some point it'll develop the right sort of antibodies and we'll all be gone. And so that is sort of a form of the black pill. Sort of like you see things and boom, everything is horrible, and so you have the potential to succumb to nihilism.
Right. Got it.
There's also a white pill, and the white pill would be the ability to, that would be religion, or in fact, some evangelical folks call it the white pill, that you suddenly see that wait a minute, there's God, and there is redemption, or there is something better outside of all this and whatnot. And the point of bringing up any of those sorts of pills is that each of them represent a way of being able to dance and deal with reality.
Right.
And all of them may have a shortcoming, or they offer some sort of solution. And they have a parallel, I think, in some of the things you and I have been talking about here in terms of how do people engage with themselves and the world in such a way that, I don't want to use the word happy, because that's a pill in of itself. As an aside, there's a famous philosopher, Alain Badiou, and he calls it the happiness industrial complex.
Oh, okay.
And that part of what drives, if there were a happiness pill, for instance, it comes in the form of, he uses, Zizek talks about this too, of Western Buddhism, that we all need to start buying meditation apps and doing yoga. Don't do Yoda.
Don't do it.
But,
I got you. Though.
There's a couple of jokes in there. I'm not going to go there.
I know.
But
it's good that you can hit on it and then go back to the topic.
That's because I woke up at 4 this morning. I'm tired. That's the only reason. But
yes.
So the idea that where was I at with this thing? Oh, it was the yoga or and all this sort of stuff and meditation, and all those are a form of either the black or the blue or the red pill. They could be the blue pill because they allow you to become better consumers, better cogs in the machine of capitalism, without ever really questioning things. Like, for instance, again, why do we need to meditate more? The things that you feel, the fact that you can't sleep, or the fact that you have you're always anxious, maybe something you need to know as opposed to being numbed from. And the goal would be, how do we engage with ourselves? That would be a wonderful example of that there is an engagement with your own suffering in such a way that may inform you maybe how to change your life, may be able to inform you on how to be able to make the lives of others better. But none of those are the sort of pills that offer a fix that either give you numb you into sleeping or give you a false sense of being awake. And so how does all that sound?
Well, it's really interesting because the whole idea of being woke and becoming, I don't know if we've defined that very well. I mean, it's being woke to my ideas and you going along with my ideas versus being woke to the general consensus. So some groups will consider you woke and others may not at the same time. So I'm just curious about how we defined being aware. But it's awareness. It's more than what we're aware of now. It's an additional awareness or larger awareness.
Well,
how's that sound?
Yeah, I dig that. Even the term woke is already, in a way, carries with it a certain ideology, a certain politics, and a certain texture that allows you to be maybe closer to something important, but it also may blind you to some things, because if they were to offer a critique even of the notion of being woke, does that mean you're always awake? That you never have to worry about going to sleep again? That means that now you have a hold of a certain truth, and does that mean now that if you're not careful, if you have a hammer, everything is a nail?
Right.
There's a potential trap in there too.
Absolutely. The idea that you've got the best idea, or your idea is the way it is for others, and it may not be that way. In fact, it may be, maybe you woke and it's a nightmare.
Well, it's interesting because
or really not realistic. Maybe not.
Well, and Bion talks about this. I talk about that guy sometimes, but also Zizek mentions this in the book that I'm reading right now, and the idea that we don't wake up from a nightmare or a dream because as a way to escape the unpleasant thoughts of the dream. We wake up so we can go to sleep from the truths that the dream are trying to tell us.
Wow.
And so waking up is actually a form of avoiding something, a suffering inherent. Zizek would say a hard kernel that you can't do something with. And that sort of puts that on its head. So even the idea of being woke.
It may, as you mentioned, happiness. It may not make you happy to be woke. As a matter of fact, it may bring more anxiety into your life that you have to have that sleep you're talking about.
Well, it's a wonderful example, of, and they often talk about the historical texture and the context of all the things that we do, and we often have this view. That there was a thing called the Dark Ages, and people ran around that they were dumb, or they thought the Earth was flat, all this sort of stuff, and then we look back, but you and I are both here in the South, and we look back and say there was a time when we were, we had slavery, but we've passed that. We're now, and so this notion of progress, that we've moved, that there is a place in the past that we can point to as a marker of how much we've grown and how better we are. Folks like Zizek would like to turn that on the head, because depending on how you look at it, there are actually more slaves in the world now than there ever were before. And that to prop up the first world, we have to crush so much of the third. That even as we speak, there are children being worked to death for the elements that go into our phones, or all of these things, the diamonds that we wear, and that for us to be in this place of comfort, to prop up our luck requires that there is an ocean of suffering, and that we are floating on that ocean, and to wake to that would be too much. To think, and I'm, as you know, I may have mentioned this, but I'm a vegetarian.
Yes.
I mentioned that before.
Yes.
And I remember the when I suddenly decided to become a vegetarian, I was at this club in Fort Lauderdale, and PETA, not the bread, but the organization,
right?
They had these things going on. They had these videos, and so you had to walk through a gauntlet of these mass farming videos, and and all these sorts of things, and you'd walk through it, you're like, holy cow. And then when I got in, I was like, I can't unsee that. And so that can be a form of being awake. If it becomes an ideological trap, and maybe a tad fascistic, if it becomes the one thing that you devote yourself to, and you say to yourself, if we all became vegetarians, the world would be perfect, right?
Right. So yeah, somebody could have that idea.
And and there are so many different flavors from elements of Catholicism to elements of ecological awareness, feminism, all these things. If you're not careful, whatever truth they have and whatever importance they have, they can become a unitary, a single thing, and as opposed to being able to move and make changes in the world, you're often sort of trapped by them. They offer you an answer to the conflict that ails you, but it keeps you from being able to move outside of that. You're trapped by it. And that's always a problem, I think.
It seems to be that we're just swapping ideologies in some way. I mean, we thought we believed that now we have something more as we're woke, and but it partitions us off into groups, or even an individual, but certainly into a group, and then there's always the opposing group. So you never quite finish this job of being woke, it seems like.
It's interesting because, again, Zizek's sort of a Marxist, and one of the things that a Marxist critique of diversity is that the more we begin to identify with certain tribal groups, the less likely we are to unify in a way that may generate global change. A Marxist equation is that it's that it's class conflict,
right.
That the workers are being crushed by the owners of capital, and so if we fix that, it'd fix everything. But there is this critique that if we stay divided, And this is Zizek Nabi, but he talks about how, like, whenever we recognize the suffering of a subset of our population, and I think the most recent would be the transgendered individuals, that we run the risk of not allowing the truth they bring to the table to arrive. Instead, what we do is we find a way to sell them jeans and tennis shoes and make they become just another tribal contingent that we can sell goods to. And the goal is that they become a market share instead of a force for change. So.
No, and it seems like it's economics, but also the politics of things at the time when you're using the market, the Marxist reference, that it is sort of that entire nation was dealing with that, and based on that philosophy or that ideology that had both politics and economics and people's well-being and the differences in class.
I got a lot of class. You've hung out with me, right? You'd realize I got class.
Man, do you have class?
I got class.
I said that
Actually, in
now
about
on
an hour, I
camera.
got class. No, hey, it's funny because we also, you and I would talk once, about, there's this guy, Jordan Peterson. You're
Yeah.
a big fan? You got
Yeah.
a tattoo?
Yeah.
And, I'm not going to tell you where, I'm not going to tell anybody where it is, but he can make it dance.
Okay.
And, but you got.
Yes, we have
you
talked
like,
about
you
Jordan
Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
And he represents sort of a response to this in a way. If Zizek's response comes from the left, Peterson's comes from the right, and his idea seems to be that there is and it's at the most conservative thought is the idea that there are some core beliefs, some things that are inherent to Western civilization or civilization in general, and those need to be held on to firmly, and they are often we run the risk of losing them. So for Peterson, it's individuality. It's personal responsibility.
Yep.
And so, as opposed, he would espouse that as the thing that we need and the thing that is missing, and that the further we move away from those sorts of things, from central myths, Christianity and things like that, they all anchor us and tether us, and that he's very skeptical of any notion of progress.
Right.
Because he often, his criticism with Marx, he had a debate with Zizek. It wasn't really much of a debate, really. I guess it was a debate. But he kept, his thought was that the folks who dare to create change in the way Marx was advocating don't really know what they're thinking. They run the risk of losing something central and important, and then something bad is going to happen. So, Peterson's battle cry is clean your room.
Right. Yeah, he wrote the 12-step of that. I'm sorry, blocking on the title right now, but it's one of his latest books. So the notion is personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Really?
I'm not very good at that.
I was going to say, not
really my
that,
forte.
but what I was going to
Not my
say was
forte.
that it's a nice idea to take that personal responsibility and clean up your own room, clean up your own house, make sure your thoughts and your progression, as opposed to progressives in larger sense, but the individual
here's a
progression.
progressive critique of that, though. While you're busy cleaning up your room, you're not noticing all the mess around you. So you literally have taken the potential for the movement of the species, of the potential for things to move forward, and now you're simply focusing on your dirty socks. So
Right.
it could be a form of the blue pill. It could be a way of forget about the possibility of changing things, forget about the possibility of growing the world in some ways. Just go home and clean your room.
Right.
And so revolution becomes either delayed, minimized, or it's done away with. And but I guess your room be clean.
Yeah, and that not the group think that we were talking about. Okay, so the idea of the black pill bring us
That's
what?
that's nihilism. Yeah.
So when you say, but isn't that the personal responsibility? I mean, the nihilism is, if I understand it right, that you your enjoyments of your own personal life and so forth, and you don't see a way of going forward.
Well,
nihilism.
nihilism.
You need to enjoy this now.
Well, I think that is a form of nihilism. I think in its broadest perspective, it is a sense of the futility of everything and the pointlessness of everything, and that hedonism is could be considered a form of nihilism.
Right.
Right. It's like suddenly you just join Motley Crue. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like
yes. So I understand it. So. So many pills to choose from at this point in time.
So and I know
where does a person go with this?
Well,
these choices?
Here's what I think that could be useful in thinking about this is that in each of these ways of thinking about the world, they're all a good start. I don't think any of the pills necessarily is bad, be it white, black, red, or blue. The blue one might be somewhat problematic because it simply asks you to be able to go back to sleep. But maybe there's nothing. But there may be a benefit in that. I think the thing to ask is, they're beginnings and not the end. I think I've talked about this before. If somebody comes in for therapy and they sit down on the couch and they say, "I want to commit suicide. I want to die," that's a good place to start. It'd be a lousy place to stay for too long and a lousy place to get stuck. But that's an okay start. That is where you are at. And to meet someone in that place is the beginning of being able to move, to do something with it. Each of those pills, I think, offer the possibility. If with the red pill, if you are suddenly awake to something that you weren't before, how do you move forward with that? How do you dance with it? How do you make it a truth that can be both particular and universal in its application?
And especially if it contradicts something you've believed in before, right? As a result of it.
You grow. Think of, in my lifetime, I have watched with women's rights, feminism. There is suddenly new ideas entered the world, and there were those who may be extreme on either side. I think it's Andrea Dworkin who said all heterosexual sex is rape because women can't possibly consent because they're under inequality. And as an extreme statement,
right.
But it functions in a way like a bit of poetry or metaphor. It certainly could wake you up. But then what do you do with it?
Right.
Where do you move with it? And I think that is the thing that each of these pills asks. Not that one is better than the other. To suddenly, for instance, with Nietzsche, nihilism is a step toward being able to create your own life. You saw something similar with the existentialists and whatnot. That there's something about the realization of futility or absurdity that could plunge you in despair. Or it could mean you can do things that you couldn't do before.
Well, that certainly makes sense to me. And just a while back we talked about the euthymic window. This
my favorite band.
Yeah, I got it. And on this continuum of really, because the extremes are not healthy, somewhere in the middle, and finding yourself available to the moment and really engaged in the process.
And if you think about that notion of the euthymic window. It's more probable that at each developmental phase and as we grow, the window has to grow with us. We have to be able to accept more or less based on where we're at. And that requires some flexibility. That requires our ability to be disturbed and suffer enough to do something with it. So we, again, that Guy Bion, I talk about him all the time. The idea that we have to grow a mind. I think I've used this example in the past and here that before I didn't have a child until I was 40. And at the birth of my son, just as I was in the process of fathering a son, my son was sonning a father. I had to grow and he had to grow and I had to grow both. I've never had a 12-year-old boy as a son, and he's never had me as a dad, and so it is a two-way street. There's something about the needing to be opened. There is it isn't that my son maybe and I woke each other and continue to woke each other, but we do generate moments of, in that euthymic window, where we feel wonderful things, but we also feel not so wonderful things. And each of those, it requires us to be something more than we were the year prior. If that makes any sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense. And these sort of developmental things are going on at the same time, and then you have to relate. You have to build a relationship between the two of you in that case. And it's not always the easy thing to do. Sort of the acceptance of the other father-son issue.
And that's where that notion of like there are forms of emotional fascism. There are familial totalitarian states in which the growth of the other is too much. It is when my son's interest and his development does not coincide with the image I have of what I want him to be, I'm suddenly confronted with a tension. There is a minimal, at least, sometimes maximal amount of suffering in that moment. And what do I do with it?
Right.
Do I, beat him until he puts the football helmet on, or do I?
No.
Well,
that's not one.
It's a lot of work.
That's
Just
not
saying,
one.
it's not a lot. Or do I say, okay, there is something about who he is and how he is ising himself, how in his going on being he may be forcing me to go on being in some ways that I haven't had to do before. He pushes and pulls me out of my comfort into someplace new, just as I do that by my presence to him. Then we do that dance together, dancing forward towards something that neither of us can completely name, though there is some sort of cultural mandate on where we're headed. At some point he leaves the house and I no longer have to pay for things.
Having adult sons, let me just break that myth right there. You will continue.
At some point he's going to start making me money, right? At some point I'll get some of this back. They'll be like,
Dad, can you loan me? Is not a real statement, by the way. Can you loan
no
me money?
Interest.
No,
Can't
there's no interest. There's no principal either. So
yeah, well, I never had those. I don't have principles.
Well, nice. All right, so I'm glad you got that comment in. All right, so what do we do? I mean, let's say if someone is woke, one of these ideologies, taking one of these pills and sort of seeing something in a different way, in a new way that maybe challenges them and their thoughts, or maybe not. It's just a bit of enlightenment. Not everybody took the pill. Not everybody's going to have that same reaction. There's always going to be this tension. You mentioned the push and pull between people who agree and don't agree and have different versions of what it should be like. That seems to be an eternal struggle in some ways for us.
Well, and this is a component in we mentioned the Zizek guy. He makes a point in saying that that conflict is inherent, even down to the level of physics. That we have this notion that there's a guy named Todd McGowan. He made a statement that the ultimate, again, this sounds political, but it has a point. The ultimate conservative notion is it is what it is.
Right.
So, and that's the, I think that's law of non-contradiction. A is A, B is B, A is not B, that sort of thing. And but at the level of physics, quantum physics, this all becomes blurred. We don't have. There seems to be something inherent in the very structure of the world around us that makes it fuzzier than we would like it to be.
Right.
And Freud's version of mental health is the capacity for ambivalence, the capacity to entertain that A may not just be A, it may be other things as well, and that there is flux and there is flow and there is tension, and it's inherent in things. And that may be a state that we may need to be able to find ourselves in at various points both not just as a nation or as a culture, but individually. The person who comes in and sits on the couch and says, "I want to die." The reason that's a good start is there's the possibility of them seeing in the word suicide something more than just what it is on the surface. That there is a complexity and inherent in there. It may begin that they want to die, but that it may go to a place that they want parts of themselves to die.
Right.
And it may be that they want to go that the feelings they have, they want those to go. They want the life that they find themselves trapped in dead. We begin in a place where there's an isness. It is what it is. That if we stay in there too long, it becomes like a shell. We can't grow out of. But over the course of the work that we do, it begins to mean more and more and more than what initially sounded nihilistic and destructive is ultimately liberating, because it started us on some path towards something.
No, I like the idea. There's a bit of what you were saying a moment ago about this awakening and this idea of new ideas and new ideology. But it also can become sort of self-centered in a way, maybe even narcissistic. And we've talked about that plenty of times on the show. So it's the ability to empathize and connect with other people. I think that's a basic issue that we've kind of
and think about the
gone
empathy
around
and
with.
connecting with yourself, the empathy and to connect with ideas, to be able to there is something when you see yourself and someone as whole. That wholeness, in a way, is a metaphor for a certain level of chaos held in tension. It is that there is a complexity there. There is a muchness, not a too muchness or a too little, but it is pregnant with something. And I think in some ways that's the opposite of narcissism. The narcissist sees both themselves and the world in a way that they are trapped in, and your ability to move into something more complex and something more fluid allows you the opportunity to grow. The narcissistic position is ultimately one that is useful but simply defensive. Just like the person who comes in and says that they want to die. That's also in some ways a defensive position. It may be the best thing they can come up with in light of all the suffering they're feeling in this moment. Hence, it's a good place to start. You always have to start somewhere, and that's as good a place as any. But you have to keep moving.
Yeah, especially when you struggle so much in your personal life that you're going to a therapist and you're going to finally say what you've been thinking and feeling on the inside, and allow a person to connect with you and have a discussion about that and maybe see some options for yourself.
As long as the insurance is good.
Okay, that's true. If you're in private practice, that's
right. That's
all right. Well, people have to make a living, but I'm thinking all that's coming out wrong here on the video.
Sorry, it's not I got to make a living. Yeah. I got to afford a boat.
A boat. Do you want to rethink that? Maybe I don't
really want a boat. I'm not much for. I could put it in my pool. I guess like a dinghy.
Yes, get a small boat.
I just like saying the word dinghy because something about that just makes me kind of giggle.
Yeah, it does. Me too. So there we are, and I'm not sure why. All right. Well, all right. So final thoughts on this in terms of just this. You started out talking about the black pill. You talked about the blue and the red pill, and even the white pill.
The white pill. That'd be religion or some sort of faith.
But it almost seems that there could be. I don't know, an infinite number of these pills, depending on a particular ideology or awakening or enlightenment that a person may have.
Well, maybe the takeaway is this, is that regardless of the pill, all of those pills might be a good start. But if they offer the possibility of some sort of permanent change, if they offer a solution with a capital S, then be wary of them. That they are... they're potentially a trap, and that there is, just as another part of the reason why I used my example of my son is that it's a place in my life that I can truly feel I'm growing whether I want to or not. He's about to be a teenager. I thought the level of sarcasm was high before. We've reached
Just wait.
level 5.
Level
It's
5.
you know, and I find myself
DEFCON.
That's right. It's-
Yeah, that's.
I find myself, you know, I don't think I've had this many murderous thoughts in my entire, you know, it's like you just, but all of that discomfort, he moves me out of that euthymic window into some place that I have the potential to be able to grow, just as I move him. In those moments of tension and the dance between us, we move. And my guess is any of these pills, if we're not careful, there's a term that, since we're hanging on Zizek, tarry with the negative. And the idea is that you have to find a way to dance with these things. It comes from the philosopher Hegel in a sort of vulgar way or a oversimplified way of looking at what Hegel called dialectics is that there's a thesis and then an antithesis, and then there is a synthesis, a combination of those two things. So somehow, you know, if you say, I want vanilla, and then somebody says, no, I want chocolate, then you come up with Neapolitan ice cream. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
That's what it is?
Close.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
There's
that's
the third one. I
yeah,
think, in the
there's this
Neapolitan.
really.
It's- Yeah, the
Really?
vanilla, the chocolate, and the strawberry, I think.
Is that-
Neapolitan?
okay.
Yes.
That's Neapolitan.
For the record, yes.
Okay, I don't know my ice creams. It just seems wrong.
It's wrong all the way.
But you keep your chocolate, your ice cream separate. But a more truthful form of that, or a more useful form, is not just some simple synthesis, but there is movement. There is can be maintained in some sort of dialectical tension, or in the movement from one to the other. Someone says you want vanilla, they say they want chocolate, and you suddenly discover strawberry. There is the possibility of, and there's something about that dance and that tension that is necessary. And most fascist ideologies, most attempts at a quick fix ruin the possibility, if you're not careful, of the sort of movement you need and to continually grow. That would be one of my criticisms of some of the way research on happiness has been, or even some of the positive psychology stuff. If you're not careful, it runs the risk of ironing over an inherent tension that is necessary for us to continue to move forward in the ways that we need to.
Yeah, that tension is all. Sometimes that's all we can see, all we can focus on, and it comes to this idea of knowing yourself. We talked about this in different ways, but knowing yourself and being a critical thinker, and
I'm very good at being a critical thinker.
critical thinker, but really surveying the ideas and making some choices about things, and also being empathic and the use of empathy for others and connecting with the larger group. So, I mean, that's quite a bit of skill that a person has to have in order to make these woke moments really work and move forward.
It's a good thing that I am so skilled. It's a good thing that I am a god among men, or a salad dressing among steak sauce, or trying to work some sort of.
This has to be the wind down of the show, because I'm not understanding anything at this point. I think I've missed.
I did say I got up at 4:00, and I didn't get a lot of sleep last night.
Right. Sorry to hear that.
Well, I can't tell you why.
Uh-oh.
Because the tape's rolling.
Yes,
and my
okay.
wife may hear it.
And we may. Okay.
Odds are not, because she gets enough of me and wouldn't. But actually, between you and me,
We
can I
may
talk
have
about
to
this?
censor this show somehow.
It's
But go
uncensored.
ahead. Yeah, whatever.
Okay, here's what happened.
Nobody's listening. Go ahead.
Okay, my wife got her hair cut.
Yes.
And she got it cut, pixie cut, where it looks like she's sort of like she may have joined the military.
Right. Okay. Yes.
And she decided her hair's been turning gray, that she's going to dye her gray hair gray. And so she has now, she came home yesterday looked as if she had joined the military, and her hair is gray.
Okay.
And and I talked before about
and that
growth
kept
moments.
you up at night. It evidently basically what you said.
Here's a
moment ago.
Here's a growth
Right.
moment, because she comes in with the haircut,
Gotcha.
and I want to be supportive. I want to be kind.
Sure
and
you
loving.
do. Yes.
I want to stick to my guns that I believe that a woman has control over her body. We all have control over our bodies. No one
Right,
should be
right.
telling what to do. Just
Right.
because I am her husband, I have no more right to
Okay.
what she does with her
All
body
right.
than anybody would.
There you go.
And I want to stay true to that.
Well said.
But at the same times, I'm a little shocked.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
and there is a roiling tension. I don't know what to do with this, because
Right.
I want to stay true to those values, but at the same time, I'm a little taken aback. And
Well, yeah, sometimes the facial expression, you may not be able to hold it, and or the words that you say, or
Yeah.
maybe, but it's
I-
kind of a
I-
vibe that can be picked up on. You
I
got to be
peed
careful
myself.
there.
Really, that was a nonverbal. Does that count as a nonverbal?
That's a nonverbal.
It's a nonverbal.
Not one I thought we'd talk about, but
It is. It is.
It is a
And so
nonverbal.
I did what I was. It was sort of a fight or flight or freeze.
Right.
And that's sort of a freeze kind of thing.
Right.
And so that sort of kept
Well,
me.
it's at that moment where you have to think more about how you're going to approach this if you're going to enter in a conversation about this at all. So there is that choice.
Well, see, and there's a famous saying by it's a Wagner saying from Richard Wagner that what is it? You are healed by the spear that smote you, right? So what that means is that in that moment of suffering, in that moment that I am struggling, there's something that I'm supposed to know about myself and her and the world. There's a place of growth, right?
Right.
But unfortunately, all it did was keep me up last night.
That's it.
But see, that's why I couldn't. And so I finally just said, I'm going to get up and do things.
Yeah, get some things going. But okay, so, but
I
it's
could
not,
use the pill.
it does sound like there might be a pill involved. It does sound like you really need to think through this in terms of maybe having that conversation about it. And you have a right to express yourself. On the other hand, you're married, and you have to put that into perspective just a little.
Well, I don't know what to do. I thought about it. This is one of my solution, and this really is not what we'd call a solution. This actually is a form of maybe the blue pill.
Right.
I thought about just taking my contact lenses out and keep them out on weekend.
Right.
I'm not joking. This really was, as I'm laying in bed at night, I think to myself,
yeah, well, you had
I
plenty of
could
time. You
take-
weren't sleeping, but yes.
I could
that's
take
what I
the
was thinking.
contact lenses out, and then I could just delay this. So how does that sound?
That doesn't sound good at all. And in my experience, the delaying of things mean that thing is going to come out on its own at some point, like
Yeah.
a volcano explosion.
Yeah, it's like-
and you're going to say all the wrong things at the
Could-
wrong
could,
time.
yeah,
So
could,
yeah.
I could have, if it make matters worse, and this actually happened. We have a pool, and it's one of those little plastic pools that you buy for $25, but it's still a pool. We have a pool,
No.
and I go downstairs, and I'm looking out the window, and I just out of the glance, I say, "Who the heck's cleaning our pool?" And it was my wife, but I didn't recognize her.
Okay.
So I'm
Okay.
like, "Holy
Well,
cow! This is like, what do I?
that-
What do I do with this?"
who is this person in my house? Oh, yes.
So it's not. So
that may not be a conversation opener either. So
It's not it's not. I'll have to come up with some
well,
way.
the marital therapists talk about acceptance
Yeah.
and this idea of accepting the other. So maybe it's something you can work on between now and the next time you see her, which is about 10 minutes from now. Or is
Here's
that-
what I think I'm going to start. Can I start the conversation? Are you trying to kill me? Is that a good start? Is this
no? It's not a good start.
not a passive, but an actively aggressive attempt to destroy my soul? Can I start there?
As you said, it may not all be about you in this thing. So,
Maybe, yeah.
I'm
I
just
might
keep
need
an
to-
open mind about that, and enjoy the moment.
I'll try to find a way. I will take that spear that smote me,
Yes.
and I will plunge it into that wound, and hopefully something good will come out of it.
Sounds like a lot of death, and it's headed in your direction. So,
It is.
so I would be
Hopefully she also,
very
the odds of her ever seeing this, unless of course you sent it to her,
I'm
are really.
as a matter of fact, this is going straight to her inbox, and let her decide this.
That might,
Consider this an intervention. So
yeah.
the best we can do.
Yeah.
All right, man. That's great. And listen, I have to say, I appreciate the conversation today, but also good luck to you in the moments and minutes and hours to come.
That's right. Like I said, it was a shingle week. Lots of shingles. Emotional shingles.
Thank you a lot. I'll see you next time.
Hey, you there, the alien watcher. You like watching podcasts, don't you? Just like you like watching for UFOs and other unidentified flying objects, if you get what I'm saying. So tune in to ColumbusPodcasting.com, where all your podcasting needs can be achieved with us. So, we're supposed to be doing a podcast commercial, but my business partner is watching the podcast because he likes to keep his mind on the go all the time, even while recording. It's never a bad time to watch a podcast. It's never a bad time to create a podcast. It's never a bad time to know about podcasting. So, ColumbusPodcasting.com. All your podcasting needs can be achieved.
If you're interested in a podcast, want to be a part of a podcast, or even create your own podcast, come down to the studio on First Avenue and we'll show you how it's done. ColumbusPodcasting.com.
Doing? What's going on? Tell me about it. I like your shirt.
Yeah, I just got back from the gym, and this was so I don't smell good, and I'm what's that Bob Dylan lyric? I was listening to a Bob Dylan song. He says, "My shirt's tight with sweat, but not as tight as a corner I've painted myself in."
Wow.
So that's what he said. Yeah,
it's kind of deep.
It is. It is. It is.
That's right. He's got all the lyrics.
And then one of the lyrics, what I like, he said, "You're gonna need me, honey. You can't make love all by yourself." I thought that was
okay.
I thought that was a good one too. Yeah,
that's pretty blunt, straight out there.
It was, yeah.
Well, it's good to see you, and I know it's been a little while, so let's figure out what's on your mind.
Post
today.
Tarantino. That was the last thing
This
we talked
is
about.
post Tarantino. Now, I did send you some additional materials that maybe we didn't touch on some of the things.
Well, I think you may want to look at those, but I actually I didn't.
Okay, but that's all right. Well, I didn't figure we were going to recap or anything, but I was thinking.
But it was the Atlantic. Those guys. In fact, I wonder if I've actually seen that article. I may have because the Atlantic sends me things through the Facebooks.
Okay. Well, she's a pretty good writer. I mean, they compared her to Hitchens and some other people. I'm not sure she's at that level, but she's done some pretty good work just looking down the list of her articles. This one, I think, captured some of the psychological issues that we were starting to touch on, maybe expanded a few things.
This is Tommy Lauren?
No.
That's a joke.
Oh, that's another.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. There are times when
Dana Stevens.
Those references go ping, over the top.
Yeah.
But that's good, man. Maybe we'll do another recap. But I'll tell you what, why don't we just plan at one point to go back and look at our recent episodes and do I wished I would have said.
Yeah, there are actually a lot of things I wish I wouldn't have said.
Well,
I have a lot of regrets.
In your case, what you did say we should have taken out and edited, but just to kind of comment on what we've done so far in this. All right, so let's get to it.
Well, a couple of things, because this would be potpourri, because there was something you brought up, this Ocean of Confirmation, and also when we leave here, I'm going to be seeing a horror film.
Yes. Okay.
And the horror film is, and so there's we could talk a bit about just the nature, the psychological utility of the horror film, because you had said your wife had said, why would you
why would you possibly go and watch a horror movie?
Yes.
No, but not
Yeah.
only her though, but I know members of the family out and groups.
why would you
that
possibly? Well, why do you think
we,
that is?
We
Why?
avoid horror movies at all costs.
Why is that? Why do
what
they
that is.
avoid horror movies? What do you think that is? Wimps.
I think it's something deep and psychological and scary.
Really?
And let's try to stay away. Maybe I don't know. I'm guessing it is, but the idea that we stay away from scary things. There's enough scary things in the world. Why would we intentionally?
That's right. Yeah. Why
go
intentionally?
toward that? Right.
Well, so that would then why would someone want a horror movie? Some people choose to see them, and right now the horror genre is sort of ascendant. There are,
yeah.
They're a big name.
They are.
But why would someone want to go see a horror movie?
I'd like to turn that question back on you. Why would someone want to go see a horror movie? I mean, I'm sure you don't ask the question around here unless you already have an answer pretty close by. So
I do have,
let's go with that.
There are a couple ways to think about this because, we talked before about the, right now the cutting edge of the field is with, where it dovetails with neuroscience.
Right.
And one of the ways to think about any of the things that we do art-wise is we can see them through that lens. And there's this notion of the euthymic window. We've talked about that before.
Yes.
And that is that there is this there is a window with an upper limit and lower limit, and that we attempt to be able to maintain a homeostasis, and that we attempt to be able to remain within that window. And some people's window. So when we get on a roller coaster, for instance,
right,
we want to be at the upper level of that euthymic window. So we take that homeostasis and we tilt it in this direction. So we give ourselves a safe and calculated thrill that just verges on trauma, but it doesn't.
Right.
So it's up in that limit. Just like we watch like some people would say, why would you want to watch Old Yeller, right?
Right.
Because, and that's the bottom end of the euthymic window. That is sadness. Like, why watch a movie where, like, everybody dies of cancer,
right,
and then the kid, their dog gets hit by a car. But people do that, right? They do it.
They do.
So in some ways, the weeper, the romantic tragedy is the opposite end of the euthymic window, bottom end, where the horror film is on the upper. So, and thrillers do a little bit of that too, but there is something about the horror film that we generate a false threat, and we place ourselves in the midst of that for that experience. And that experience,
right.
And another way to think about this too is there was a cat by the name of Daniel Stern. He did a lot of work with infants. He talks about vitality affects.
Okay.
And that, if you ever notice, like, if you have a baby, ever seen one of them babies?
Yes, couple at the house there for a number of years.
So yeah, I had one of them too. It was like, oh, and at one point I was like,
scary.
Another speaking of horror film.
Yeah, that's right. Our own personal horror film right there.
And I'm convinced that if anybody, when we were about to have a kid, everybody's like, oh, it's great, you're going to love this baby
can't
thing.
Wait till you have
Nobody tells me. And then those same people, I'm like, I haven't slept in 6 months.
Right.
I'm covered in all sorts of horrible things. And
you
you're
don't smell very good.
And
either.
then the same people that told me how great it was looked at me and said, yeah, isn't it horrible? I'm like, that's not what you were telling me before.
That's not how you told me all this wonderful stuff that was going to happen. You should do it too. No, sharing my pain is what this
What
might
were
be.
you up to with this thing? Okay, but you have having the baby. Say somebody interact with a baby. There's a way in which to be able to interact with a baby. We do peekaboo, peekaboo. We speak in a way that we accent these vitality affects. We scare them. We do all these sorts of things. So the very development of our nervous system is based on these interactive moments in which we create attenuated near traumas. We literally generate these things. Mm-hmm. So you can think about it. A horror film is a little like just grown-up peekaboo.
Right.
So it's from Stern's standpoint, we seek out these experiences that give us this same sort of peekaboo. So what is a horror film? It's just a giant screen version of that sort of peekaboo.
Well, it's almost something that we do that we have some control over as well.
And it is a controlled
trauma.
So
we don't go too far out there to scare ourselves and really bring about the trauma, but it's sort of regulated in some way. So I can understand it now. Well, that's helpful. But you're right. The the horror genre is everywhere. There's always a horror movie on. Almost always a horror movie on.
And another way to think about this from a neuroscientific perspective, there is Panksepp, I think I'm pronouncing his name right. He talks about that the brain is actually organized along, there's 7 organizing principles of the brain. So they're like 7 systems. And one of those, I think there's procreation, there's aggression, there's seeking, there's attachment, there's sleepy, there's there's
I knew that was coming. All right, keep going.
What there's I'll have to think about the others, but
Okay.
But
That's
one of the
all right.
ones that are important is this the seeking system. Like, and they use the example of a dog. Like this morning, my wife and I got up and we walked the dog.
Okay.
And apparently you're supposed to use a leash, and if it bites somebody, you're supposed to have you have legal recourse. I didn't know that. I just ran.
Okay. Okay.
So we walked the dog. Dogs are a wonderful example of the seeking system. Just wagging tails,
Right,
smelling
right,
stuff.
right.
Ate a diaper. Somebody threw a diaper out. The dog ate it. I don't know. These things
Yes,
happen.
I think I get the point.
But the dog
yes.
that does the seeking thing.
It did not eat a diaper, but go ahead. All right.
He did smell a diaper. My wife got
Okay,
upset.
all right, there we
But it was a really big baby's diaper. Like, I'm thinking that baby had to at least be 200 pounds. So I'm not really sure what was going on there. And there was a pacifier the size of like
a giant pacifier,
yeah, it
like
was
an adult pacifier.
Yeah, I'm like,
Is that where we're going?
what was that? What was that
Okay.
about? But
I'm definitely not ready, but I'd like to get to the end of this example at some point. Yeah.
Dog seeking. And we have the same thing. And so part of it is that, that we often have to seek out, like, boredom is something we all have to find a way to escape. We have to create a life in which there are not just bright and shiny things, but there are things that are loud. There are things that move quickly, and the art serves that purpose too. And you can think of a horror film. It's got some bright and shiny, but it's also got some booms and some things that move quickly, and so it
that alarms us just enough,
But
not
see,
full scale.
in these moments, all that sounds cool, but I think we should also go down the rabbit hole of Melanie Klein.
Okay, you're going to talk object relations.
Object
with us now,
relations,
right
and
now.
Melanie
Okay,
Klein.
get ready for that.
So this is one of the things about Melanie. And Melanie Klein, if you go back and read some Melanie Klein, some of that stuff is just really way out there. Like that,